And the last couple of weeks, the subject really has been voting and politics in that order. We had a week where it was pretty much centered around voting, and then we dragged that into last week. And last week we were pretty much around politics, and today I want to finish up on the politics end of it. I don't know if you know what the word, I'm not trying to be funny, if you know what the word etymology means. It tells you the origin of a word, so to speak. So we took the etymology of the word politics itself, went back to its first usage, and what it actually meant, coming from Greece, that politics actually means citizens representing citizens for citizens. It's kind of like one of us in this room, we're citizens, that would be representing the people in this room for the sake of the people in this room. That was the origin of politics. When you hear that definition, it's like, boy, that sounds pretty good, because that's not what we got now. That's definitely not what we've got. But that was the idea behind it. It's sort of like the preamble to the Constitution. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. The whole idea of we the people was, we are people that all live together, we're all citizens of the United States, and we're a bunch of people that realize, you got to remember, they had been under the English rule. They were very well aware of what it meant to be oppressed and to have a government breathing down your neck all the time. And they were saying, we're not having that anymore. We're people of the United States. We want to form a more perfect union, very similar to what at the end of the Gettysburg Address. And I bring these things in because I said from the very beginning, I'm not just going to be in the Bible. I'm going to refer to articles and different things that being an American is about. The last line of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, he talks about the government, in his very, very last line, that the government of the people, by the people, for the people. It sounds like the exact definition of what the original intent was. And this brother's saying that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. That's very strong language. I'm guessing he would be fairly upset to see in the United States of America, not even the earth, but the United States of America looking at it and saying, what on earth has happened since 1863? We talked about the evolution, so to speak. Politics became what we call political science. There's an actual science to politics, and we looked at it last week from Machiavelli right through to our present day, different things that have been said and all that. In this particular magazine right here, which I got this last week, it's kind of funny. They've got an article in there about the election of 1824, which, unless you're a serious historian of American history, probably wouldn't mean an awful lot. The opening paragraph is this: before the election of 1824, the United States was at the tail end of the so-called era of good feelings, a time political partisanship was low, and one party, the Democratic Republicans, dominated U.S. national politics. Now, this next sentence is the one that I find fascinating. The election of 1824 ended that. I mean, this sentence could come right out of where we're at right now in the election. The clashing interests were protectionism, trade. They were sharply divided on the views of the role of government. Nice way of saying big government, small. They were divided on that and America's place in the larger world, which created schisms, which still, this is what he says, schisms which are still to this day. When if you've been following it and hearing the issues, I looked at that and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. We're 200 years down the road and we're still talking, arguing, fighting over the same things. But this election of 1824 was a special one because of the way it unfolded. And it was nothing. The way the country was up until then was nothing like it is now. I don't want to get into it, but it's a fascinating subject to look at how the founding fathers realized they could see down the road what could happen because they understood human nature. And they took every measure necessary to avoid that, and here we are. We're still in that position. Ecclesiastes, the first chapter, says, that which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done, and there's nothing new under the sun. I thought that was kind of interesting that, we look at it, we're looking at now and politics and the election and all that as, oh my goodness, and Solomon would just be sitting there practically yawning and saying, but this is the way it's always been. This is the way it works. Now, the nature of politics has evolved for sure, which is what we've been talking about. My illustration last week that politics is like a car. Okay, the car doesn't run over people. A car doesn't determine its destination, all those kinds of things. The car is like politics. It's only a vehicle. The problem with any accident, with anything that happens, is because of the driver. Likening the driver, obviously, to the politicians, the problem we've got is not the vehicle. Politics is not a bad thing. The way it exists now, the way it's been perverted and distorted, it's nasty. It's nasty business. The bigger problem, I had said, which we had talked about a little bit, the bigger problem, using the same illustration, the bigger problem is that the mode of transportation is changing. I don't think there's a person in this room who would say, yeah, I think our system and the politics and the way we're doing things is really great. The mode of transportation is changing. The problem is that the politicians insist on driving. And I was thinking this morning about that kind of like a little of a statement where it's sort of like when the horse and buggy transitioned over to automobiles and the Model T. It's like people that were riding the horse and buggy said, I got this one, and they get into the car, and it's not going anywhere. Gas into it. Oh, that's strange. Never had to put gas in a horse. Yeah, well, this is not a horse, okay? This is a car. Okay, I'll put the gas in. I'm still not going. You got to turn the key. What key? I don't even know. What are you talking about? I never put a key in a horse. Well, you have to put a key in this, and you have to turn it to start it. Okay, got that one covered. Where the heck are the reins to this thing? I don't see any reins in here. That wheel in front of you and the pedal on the floor. This is what operates. Well, horses don't have wheels and pedals. And I'm being funny about it, but that's where we're at. The politicians haven't a clue how to solve the problems we've got. And there are people on this planet that are not politicians. They're experts in their fields, and they understand how to go about solving these problems. They're already in the Model T, and they know how to drive it. But politicians are not moving over. They are not letting go of this thing. I was thinking about that this morning, this last week, and I want your thoughts on this statement. I was listening to an interview with a senator, and she made the comment, people are losing their faith, and she was referring to faith in government, politicians, and politics. That's what she was referring to. How does that strike you, that kind of statement? In government, politics, and politicians. But this is the thing. The politicians, they cannot believe that the United States of America doesn't trust them or put their faith in them anymore. They really believe that. I'm watching this interview and I'm listening to this lady, she's a lovely lady, but I'm listening to her thinking, how delusional is that world that they would even expect?
Exactly.
I mean, using the terminology. By the way, I agree totally with what everybody is saying, because my response was absolute incredulity of this politician, and at the same time saying, praise God. Because if they lose their faith in government, they're going to put it in something, and hopefully it'll get back in God, because that's where it belongs. Something I've been saying the last couple of weeks is that I feel, and I think, that the church has not really been operating at that we've gotten entangled, and we're more caught up in everything else than maintaining a position of saying my faith is in God. That's who my faith is in God. It is very, very, very difficult, I think. I think it can be done, because I think the church is doing it, to read this book and see what God has done for thousands of years. For everybody, not just the people that pray, but for everybody. What is his long suit? And then somehow think that man's going to solve their problem. This last issue of Time magazine had a statistic in it. 1964, 70% of the American people trusted government. We wouldn't have been old enough to trust the government in the sense that we didn't even know what the government was yet, executive, anything like that. So it's kind of like really our parents' generation. 70% trusted the government. Last year, November, it was down to 19%. That's more than a 50% shift in trust in the government. The most recent survey that they did, 20% trust the presidency, and that was the way it was worded, not necessarily the president, but the presidency, the whole concept of having a president, the presidency. 20% trust presidency, 6% trust Congress. Those are, to me, alarming statistics, because I look at it and I think, and these are not apparently skewed, if that's true, you're looking at the vast majority of the people around us recognize there's something wrong, but nothing is being done about it. I mean, we wouldn't operate our families that way. We wouldn't operate anything like that. If we knew something was killing us, unless we had a serious problem, we wouldn't eat it or drink it. I mean, let's face it. It doesn't make any sense. And this is it really has gotten a bit nuts in this whole arena. I had said last week We don't vote for particular results, people, or party. We vote his will. We're talking about prayer. We're people of prayer. And we get a hold of God's will, not the results. If he tells me to vote for a particular candidate, does that mean that person's going to be in the White House? That's none of my business. That's his. He tells me what to do. He makes his will known. And that's what we do. We exercise, according to Jesus anyway, thy will be done, because it isn't always done. So we come into agreement with the Father, to work with the Father, to see his will done on earth. And voting falls into that kind of category. These are things that we've been saying. I made the comment that modern politics over the last few hundred years are called modern politics. Modern politics wants to control and divide people, eliminate their choices by manipulating people with deceit, fear, and simply overpowering them. And we see this in every governed sphere, not just the civil government. We can go into a lot of homes where this is the way you control the house and the whole. We've talked about some of these things. We went to Genesis 3. We didn't go into a big reading of it, just to identify very clearly that there was a serpent, and we cannot ignore that the politics of the enemy are still at work. When you look at the politics of the enemy, the serpent, not much has changed since Genesis 3. We looked at the Herods of the New Testament. There was 4 of them. We didn't go into detail, just that there's Herod the Great, his son Antipas, his grandson Agrippa the First, in Acts Agrippa the Second. Just don't have time to go over everything. But like I said, I got this last week. But Herod the Great was the first one. He was the one that killed all the little kids when Jesus was born. So the article's about him. But this is what I wanted to read, just this opening paragraph. In the New Testament, King Herod the First is a villain. But the Herod of history was more complex. Balancing the needs of the Judean populace and the rulers of Rome, this consummate politician, that's the first thing they call him, a consummate politician, ambitious builder, and master organizer, was able to transform the Holy Land. I just thought it was interesting. When I got the magazine, I thought, we were talking about this guy last week. And I started reading the article, and having that jump out immediately, they identify him as an unbelievable politician. Because we had said last week, killing the babies was not a religious issue. It was a political one. Because this was a point last week, I think it's one of the most important. I don't think I made it clear last week. And I think it's one of the most important things I really have to say. And this is still looking at the 4 generations of the Herods. In chapter 26 of Acts, Paul is appearing before the great-grandson of Herod the Great. So it's 4 generations down the road. These guys have been a nasty work. They've killed babies. They've killed disciples. They've cut off the head of John the Baptist. There's been a variety of things that they've done. This has been a nasty family. And we get down to the 4th generation, and Agrippa II is on the throne. And Paul has to appear before him.
Agrippa interrupted him. Do you think you can persuade me to become a Christian so quickly?
Far be it from me. I'm no Bible scholar, but that's not really the intent of it. He says, you almost persuade me, which is an entirely different thing. It's not adding, like, mocking him. He's actually saying to him, he listened to Paul share the gospel, and his response was, you almost persuade me to become a Christian.